And you don't want us to do it.
Professor Koehler did say we should stand up. So.
That's not even, I would not have said that anything. Prior to
So we thought that was the standard use, and so James was gonna like pull it out, but you guys didn't see this. So use that now. But I would say it's like I'm definitely
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Prout. It's great to see everybody here. My name is Amora Huey, which most of you know, and as most of you know, I'm a professor in the English department here at BGSU. This semester, I've had the privilege of teaching the BFA capstone class, and so that's when our graduating creative writing majors are completing their thesis in fiction, poetry, nonfiction, some combination of those things. And so tonight is part of how we celebrate that hard work. It's also a requirement for completing the degree, so it's a mandatory celebration as a public performance of their work. Tonight, and then for the next 2 Thursdays after this, April 11th and 18th, we'll be hearing from this year's graduating BFA cohort. Just some really great work that includes a wide range of genres, using language to tell stories, to explore this world and invented worlds, which you'll hear some of tonight, to make music and meaning, and to help us better understand the human experience. It's been a real honor to teach them this semester. I'm really excited about these next 3 readings. Tonight we have 2 readers, Jacob Yeager and James Koehler, who will be sharing some fantastic and fantastical fiction to get us started. And I have the honor of introducing Jacob to kick things off. Like I said, this is my first year at Bowling Green, and Jacob was one of the first students I met. My Monday morning modern poetry class, he sat in the front on the right side, told me right away that poetry wasn't his thing. But in that class, he was certainly willing to dive into all the poetry we read, even though it was difficult. He helped us make sense of, for example, Eliot's The Wasteland. Jacob is always quick to speak up with confidence, quick and eager to puzzle through challenging material. As his BFA classmates can attest, he's generous and thoughtful with feedback, and when we need to start class with a good laugh, we can always turn to him. It has been my pleasure to get to know him and his work this year. Jacob is a writer and digital 3D artist whose work explores the vast and wild worlds of science fiction and fantasy, always through grounded and impactful characters and environments. Inspired deeply by real-world history, he aims to create impactful and accessible fiction and art within the wide genre of speculative fiction. Please join me in welcoming Jacob Yeager.
Thank you so much, Amora, for that. It is very surreal being up here right now, but we do what we can. So I'll be reading 2 excerpts from 2 of my works for you tonight, starting with the first chapter or so of a science fiction novel I started cooking up last semester called Kokobi. So, the contrails from the cargo rocket split the sky into countless pieces. The crisp autumn breeze pulled more of the surrounding red and yellow leaves into the air. Solomon adjusts his posture against the harsh back of the park bench and lets out a sigh as he gazes down at his watch. Solomon looks away again and relaxes again into the bench, adjusts his blocky glasses and gazes up at the pinprick in the sky. You could almost see what it was from here. Even in the daylight, the contrails all pointed to it like an unavoidable beacon. The future of humanity. The wind picks up more, sending the ground's leaves scratching harshly against the concrete walkway of the park. It nearly masks the sounds of uneven footsteps. Solomon cranes his head behind him and sees the hunched figure of the man he's been waiting for. He wants to call out, to greet his brother, but his breath catches in his throat. His brother leans against the long wooden cane in his left hand, a 35-year-old man reduced to the shape and silhouette of a man 3 times his age. Every step causes his body to hunch and wobble unevenly, the heavy labored breathing of his lungs audible even from across the 20-foot gap between them. Solomon can't help but look away and squeezes his eyes shut. Casey, he whispers, his own body paralyzed by the sounds of struggle coming from his little brother. Solomon sits still for a few more moments, his left hand unconsciously moving to scratch the back of his skull vigorously, breaking him free from his stupor. He stands up and flashes a curt smile at Casey while he rushes forward to help. No, don't you do it, Saul. I can make it. Casey grunts in exertion. His eyes flash up towards Saul, emerging under his brown and slightly curled hair. Please, he whispers. Solomon stops and just watches Casey shamble forward, every joint on his body barely moving. Christ, Casey, Solomon whispers softly. The two of them have met here every week now, since the diagnosis. Last time, the two brothers had walked the trails as they talked. That wouldn't be happening now. Solomon wants nothing more than to close his eyes and pretend he wasn't here, that he wasn't seeing his little brother turn into a statue bit by bit each and every week. He didn't want to think about what was in the sky and what that meant for the both of them. But he couldn't. He knew better. So he keeps his eyes open and watches his once fit and healthy best friend struggle to sit on a bench. Casey lets out a grunt of pain as he finally manages to maneuver himself onto the seat. He catches his breath and lets out a short chuckle. Sorry I'm late, Sol. I saw some really cool rocks on the way here, so Casey says after a few seconds, the kind of joke only a geologist could make. The kind only one could laugh at, too. The air goes flat as Solomon internalizes the horrid joke, but he can't help but crack a smile and let out a short laugh. He moves over and slowly sits down next to Casey and turns to look him in the eyes. You motherfucker. That's embarrassing, really. Solomon laughs, and Casey joins in, interrupting the chilly and stark air with a hearty noise for what feels like an eternity. A genuine chuckle from the Dr. Neil. Wow. All it took was... The laughter trickles away slowly, reality settling back in. In the distance, another cargo rocket launches up to the horizon. The wind dies down for a moment. Solomon's smile drops. His Adam's apple bobs while he swallows with dry lips. Casey, it's progressing so fast. Casey holds up a hand to stop him, his elbow locked in place like a robot, like the machines that were putting everything together in orbit, the Sentinels. Solomon couldn't help but think of his brother as one of them. How the metal trusses and beams would contort around Casey's body, a dark black screen to replace his face and eyes, inhuman, a corpse, petrified under a second skeleton replacing each and every muscle, tendon, and bit of flesh. Solomon looks away again and shakes the thought from his mind. It's fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, FOP. Stone man's disease. Bit by bit, all of his tissue would be replaced by bone, and there was no treatment or cure even imagined. Let's not even think about it, all right? It's honestly not the elephant in the room, Casey smiles, looking up at the sky. I don't think I'll be coming with you, so you and the others will have to make do. Solomon just looks down at his lap, his left hand scratching the itch that was always in the back of his skull. If I stay, I can fix it, find a cure. It's not impossible. Solomon doesn't hear Casey. He stands up and starts to pace in front of the park bench, muttering mostly to himself rather than Casey. We can use my lab. I still have connections. Solomon, stop. Funding will be a hurdle, but the coalition will listen to me since... Solomon, stop! Fucking listen to me! Casey screams, spittle flying out of his mouth, his hunched body leaning forward, his eyes ablaze. Solomon stops. His shoulders sag, and he sits right back down. He scratches the back of his head again. Listen, Casey grunts and maneuvers his hand on Solomon's shoulder. I get it, okay? But it's too late. I'm a doctor too, remember? It's impossible to fix me before the expedition. Solomon's head bows, his voice rasping out of his mouth in a harsh scoff. You have a PhD in geology, Casey. I'm a biologist and a goddamn doctor. That is not the same thing. If I can't even save my fucking brother, then what is it all for? His voice takes on a deeper scratch, his hands clenching tight enough to leave marks on his palms. Soul, it's all for that. Casey nods to the speck in the sky. One of us needs to be on the coca. You need to be there for me. Don't let this be the reason to throw the opportunity away. Solomon looks up. The spacecraft in the sky, the Kokabeel, the only thing that brought the world together. The coalition was formed for this, because of this. Humanity's first interstellar research vessel, cruised by the brightest and boldest the species has to offer, sent out into the stars to learn the secrets of the universe. I don't want to do it without you, Casey, Solomon spits out between gasps. We're a team. Solomon struggles to swallow and looks away. I don't know how to live without you. He turns back to face Casey. You've been with me my whole life, little brother. Through undergrad, mom and dad. God damn. Solomon croaks while he still tries to compose himself again. If I have to choose between the Kokabeel and you, Casey, I will choose you. Casey sighs, his lips pressed into a tight blank line. His eyes seem to be filtering out so much pain. I'm already dead. Forget about me and learn the secrets of this cruel universe. There are really fucking cool rocks up there, Casey. You'll miss them all. Casey's eyes close while his face contorts into a short smile, tears trickling down his cheeks. I'll see them, he breathes softly, at peace. I promise I'll see them all. The hiss of hydraulics interrupts the moment. Casey's face shimmers for a moment before the surrounding daylight fades, replaced by the fluorescent spotlight that makes Solomon squint and raise his eyes. Casey doesn't react. The crisp autumn air is overwhelmed by the bland taste of recycled and filtered air. The park around the brothers disappears into hard, dull, metallic walls with a single porthole, looking out towards an endless sea of stars. Casey fades away from this new setting, turning steadily translucent until he disappears into still air. Solomon blinks, and reality rushes back. He pulls the headset off his face and eyes and cranes his neck back towards the now open entrance to the room. The large and bulky silhouette of a sentinel stands in the doorframe. Its black blank face flashes for a moment. The metallic body lurches as it steps aside. Something inside it whirs. Solomon blinks his red eyes, rubbing at the dark circles beneath them to adjust his glasses. His body floats above the floor from the zero gravity of high Earth orbit. He spins his body around as his shoulders square and his fists clench. Solomon scowls and scoffs at the sight, but says nothing. He looks back out to the sea of stars and then down to the headset that let him relive one of his last conversations with his brother. Here he was, aboard the Kokabeel, about to sail into the stars with the best and brightest of humanity to loom their place in the universe. A crew of 6 meant to be 7. This next piece. This next piece is an excerpt of my thesis titled Mule. I am absolutely obsessed with Dungeons & Dragons, as many of you know, and wrote this piece as a backstory for an innkeeper character my players briefly met in the first campaign I ever ran. Some of you might know about the trope of starting a Dungeons & Dragons campaign in an inner tavern, and I can proudly state that this game did not start in this inn. It started in a different one. I wanted to have this character and story act as an introduction to this world, of which there are many, many, many more stories to be told. I just need to actually write them. Hopefully that's not relatable, but also relatable. The section I will be reading in this piece is from the middle of the story in which Brim, the resident innkeeper of the quiet and poor village of Nantwich, toils with passively living under the oppressive theological empire of Ortis, a human-led society who worships a goddess they call the Chroma Queen. Her enforcers, known only as the clergy, ruthlessly and zealously pursue any and all non-believers and by proxy, non-humans. The last of the patrons had finally managed to shuffle their way out of the inn. It was already deep into the night, and Brim welcomed the silence with open arms, that is, until the door creaked its way open once again. Pardon me, sir. A well-spoken, almost soothing voice interrupts. Another stranger to deal with. Brim sighs. He was never one to turn down potential business, but the day had been plenty long already. Sorry, tavern's closed. Come back tomorrow, unless you want a room. Brim turns around and plasters the same false smile he uses for each of his rugged customers. If falls as soon as he sees the stranger. The stranger is not from Manwich or from anywhere else around here. He has a faint accent, the sort someone from the capital would have, but Junestone was nearly a 3 months ride across the entire continent. The man's outfit was stark black leather, perfectly fitted around his body, bleeding the lines between armor and attire. He had matching black leather gloves on his hands as well, the kind that tightened with each flex of a finger. His hair was well kept and short, and though long enough to be slicked back perfectly behind his head. The most uncanny thing about the man was his smile. It was too wide. There was something about his eyes, too. They were dark and gray, and as Brim turned to face him, the man's smile stretched a little larger. No, a room will not be necessary. I don't plan to be here long. Ooh. His finger points to the top shelf behind the counter. That's a shame. I see you have some Junestone in your mind. I could certainly do with a taste of home right about now. Brim just stands like a statue, his eyes wide. He knows this man. He knows what this means. This is the same face that has been etched into Brim's mind for nearly a decade now, ever since he turned in that family of heretics all those years ago. He can't help but stammer. As much as he wants to forget, his hands clamp tightly down on his own forearms. Yes, of course, sir, Brim fights the urge to scratch at his skin. The man's smile widens, stretching the flesh of his face like worn and tanned leather. He holds up a hand. No worries, my friend. I'm not here to make a mess of things, nor am I one for breaking your nightly routine. He takes a breath and starts to rummage around in his coat pocket, pulling out a pipe. You don't mind, do you? Brim's face goes red. His eye unconsciously twitches despite his best efforts to hide it. Nobody smokes in the Brimstone Inn. Brim forbids it. He couldn't stand the smell, the mess, the filth. Brim notices a lapel on the man's chest, a small purple rose. The man's eyes squint just a little. Brim swallows tightly and nods, his eyes flicking back to the dead eyes of the man across from him. Of course, go ahead and take a seat, if you like, Brim says, holding the largest breath in his lungs imaginable. The man with the purple lapel puts the pipe between his lips and nods curtly, swiftly taking a seat and making himself quite comfortable on one of Brim's chairs. I'm looking for a mule. It snuck through a few cracks when we came upon its horrifying family on the road north of here just a few nights ago. By utter and complete happenstance, I might add. Our queen works in mysterious ways, he says, looking around the open floor of the inn and bar. As the resident tavern keeper for this impressive establishment, I must say before we go any further that this place is quite a sight. I feel like I've stepped through a portal back to Junestone. Very well done, sir. This is quite the place. By her light, there might be hope for you Redotians yet, the man exclaims. Yet most of you choose to wallow in the ignorant dirt and ignore the light of your queen. The man's face was utterly neutral. Anyway, as I was saying, I thought you'd be the perfect place to start in my search for, well, the truth. Aren't you going to take a seat? Brim focuses on all his effort on standing still and upright. His lips quiver for a moment. Everything starts to fall into place, even though deep down Brim knew it all already. The stranger he had chased out only a few nights ago was a heretic, a traitor to Ortis and its people. She had done the cardinal sin. She had spawned a mule. Devils, parasites, monsters, cannibals, all accurate descriptions if the clergy were to be trusted. But Brim knew the truth. Mules were simply half human, half elves, indistinguishable to a normal human beyond the pointed ears, slurred and slandered for their infertility, labeled as nothing short than glorified livestock to be called, dehumanized. The stranger from earlier in the week had come to Brim for refuge, for help, for a way out. Then Brim had kicked her out and threatened her life without a second thought, without even hearing what she had to say. The man with the purple lapel had said a family, then by the light of the chroma queen, she would have wanted to bring that mule here to his inn. Talking with a heretic, even without knowing, could be enough to be branded a traitor and condemned to death if you weren't careful. Brim's eyes widened, his body began to shake, and he leans away from the man with the purple lapel and nearly stumbles onto the floor. He should have reported this to the clergy immediately. Now, the man with the purple lapel chuckles, putting his feet up onto his table, his leather boots creaking as he crosses them and takes another smoke of his pipe. Are you feeling all right, tavern keeper? No, I didn't quite catch your name, he says. His smile turns smug. Brim knows that the man already knows his name. Brim falls to his knees, interrupting the man's taunt with a cry of horror. By her light! By the light of the Chroma Queen! She was here no less than 4 days ago. She was here, and I was foolish enough to not even realize, Brim wails, clutching at his chest. The man with the purple lapel pushes his chair back suddenly and rushes over to Brim's side. He grabs him by the back of his coat and spins him around. The man's eyes were alive now, burning with a purple fire of hatred and passion, his smile desperate. His other gloved hand curls open into a claw. A yellow orb of hot, radiant light floats above his curled fingers. Where? Tell me everything! The man pushes his hand closer to Brim's face, enough to singe his hair. Brim continues to wail. He tells the man everything, from where she sat, what she had said. No detail was left out. He truly did have nothing to hide. She's dead anyway. The clergy is the iron will and hand of the Chroma Queen. Nothing would get between them and her will. I didn't realize what she was. I failed the queen. I let a heretic tarnish my home. The words pang at his heart and soul. Not lies, but also not truths. The man with the purple lapel sighs, drops Brim, and extinguishes the orb. A look of almost disappointment flashes over his waxy face. He starts to pace back and forth. No, my friend. Sorry. No, my friend. She is not the mule, and you have nothing to fear. They could have been any one of us, sneaking within the walls and cracks of our lands like rats. They're always there, scratching at the wood, but as long as you were vigilant, and perhaps get a cat, they will not trouble you any longer. Fortunately, the good citizens of Nanwich have nothing to fear, for your cat has just arrived. The man with the purple lapel offers a gloved hand down to Brim. Brim is still panting. He moans on the ground. His eyes flash up to the extended hand, but he opts to help himself up instead. He takes a breath. What does this mean for me? For my inn? The man with the purple lapel shrugs. Who knows how many mules and those who sat in your chairs, drunk from your tankards? Soon it will be none. Rest easy. He smiles wide again, his eyes alive with that same fire. As for you, you've done your duty, Brim Sartori. The man with the purple lapel's face falls. But perhaps the Chroma Queen does not share my sentiment. He walks right up to Brim and leans in close behind his ear. You let a rat slip through the cracks, my friend, he hisses. He pulls back, clapping a hand tightly onto Brim's shoulder. The black leather of his gloves creaks as he tightens his grip. His head turns slightly, measuring Brim up one final time. Brim just stays utterly still, his breath barely seeping through his lips. The man with the purple lapel's eyes go dull and dark once again. Fortunately for you, he found her, and your swine of a mate. He claps his hand on Brim's shoulder once again, this time lightly. All that's left is the mule, but we'll find it. The Chroma Queen needs her loyal eyes and ears through each and every one of her citizens, and I trust that you'll heed that call. He pokes Brim's chest with a single finger, sticking his other hand out for a handshake, and Brim slowly looks down at it. His body feels like iron. His bare hand slowly moves up to grasp the black glove. It closes around the hand, and the two men shake hands. Brim holds his face in place like a hardened wax, desperate to keep this show up for as long as possible. His right hand falls to his side, limp yet firmly locked like a statue. Thank you, for your cooperation," the man with the purple lapel says as he begins to move towards the door. "We expect you and your village to have a gallows constructed by the morrow's end. We have heretics to purge." He points to the various chairs. "We'll be needing 2 of those as well. As shameful as it will be to soil such excellent carpentry with the stench of elf and the faithless." "Any and everything in service to the Queen," Brim says, blessing himself with the sign of the Queen as the man stands up and turns towards the door. "The clergy has not forgotten the services you provided all those years ago, Mr. Sartori. The Queen has permitted you mercy for your current mistakes because of them. Everything happens for a reason. Enjoy the rest of your evening," he says, and disappears through the door into the darkness. Brim stays completely still, the man with the purple lapel's final words ringing through his skull. He holds his breath for an agonizing while, not daring to even breathe until he is sure that the man is gone. 10 minutes pass, 15, 20. Finally, he gasps and clutches at his chest, retching briefly before producing vomit all over his freshly cleaned floors. He stares at his hand, the one that touched the dead-eyed man with the purple lapel. He screams in horror and looks around frantically. He crawls along the floor on his hands and knees, scrabbling along the ground, knocking over any and everything in his way as he crawls behind the counter. He gropes around the bottom of the bar, grabbing at various bottles of liquor before knocking them aside with a wine. He grunts through his teeth frantically before his eyes rest on a bucket of filthy used mop water tucked away by the corner of the closet. Brim lunges towards it, nearly knocking it aside as he plunges his right hand into the brown water, scrubbing furiously at his palms and fingers, tears flowing down his face. He rubs and rubs until the flesh on his hand begins to fall away. It wasn't the mules he was disgusted with. It was himself. The family he had turned in and betrayed to the clergy as a teenager, his best friend, his only friend, gone, fed to the clergy like the rats he was taught heretics and mules would be. Thank you.
Hi guys. We have one more round of applause for Jacob. This is hard. This is really hard. Okay. Am I supposed to say my name? I don't know. My name is Aspen, and I have the honor and privilege to introduce James. So about 3 years ago, I was in this class for some sort of like poetry workshop, and I distinctly remember at the time we had an MFA teacher who asked our class to read aloud this poem. We were all freshmen and sophomores in the class, so, no one wants to read out loud. So we all sat in silence for a good little while until suddenly I look around the room and this kid who looks like he should have been a math major slowly looks around the room as he raises his hand, just like that. This kid, his name was James. And he spoke with the most enthusiastic, passionate, feudalistic, booming voice I had ever heard. And from there, I was like, damn, this math major really likes poetry. Come to find out later, as I started to talk to James, he was actually, in fact, a creative writing major. James is from a small town in Ohio where he claims that it's so small, and if I'm remembering this correctly, that the only 2 things in his town were like a laundromat and a gas station. Although he says that he's from a small town, his writing is far from small. As James has a writing voice that captivates his audience. And truly I can say that not one of James's writings have I ever gotten bored reading or not enjoyed. James is also the funniest person I've ever met. The first time in that same class where I met James, we were talking about things that people like to post on Instagram. After a lot of convincing to let James, James let me follow him on Instagram, basically. I had stalked him for a while. And the most recent post from him was from 2019 of, and I quote, a Balenciaga woman's pink high heel sandal made from rubber for $475, where James put as his caption, "This world is truly a terrible place." This was a perfect example of the type of humor that James brings to his writing while also focusing on deeper aspects of life. James is a true friend through thick and thin, as he one time helped me chase a boy across campus on foot and then by car. And if you're wondering, no, I never talked to him. 2 other times, and for some reason, always running to my car in the downpour rain, as we both had to try to protect our comic book drawing pads, as James literally shoved it up his jacket and ran without being able to see because his glasses were covered in rain. And many late nights spent in a Colleen Center editing the newspaper that hardly anyone read. But, I can ramble on about how everyone needs a James in their life. James has a story titled Goliath that has been published in an online lit magazine called Unlikely Stories. He's also created a few web comics online, called Originality and Face It. And he also has a really funny YouTube channel online called With the Boys that he has with his friends. And tonight you're going to listen to one of my favorite stories that James has ever written, called The Hero Saves the Almost Corpse.
Wow. Thank you, Aspen. That was, I'll be honest, I was a little scared. You were hyping that up. I was scared what was going to be said in that. But thank you. Honestly, you've already covered a few of what I was going to do here. But first, before I start, can we get another round of applause for Jacob? That's right. Yeah. Dude, Mule, that was real intense, man. The Cocobile, real emotional. I bet you're all hoping that the next reading is going to be half as intense, dramatic, and emotional, and serious as that last one. Yeah, I'm reading The Hero Saves the Almost Corpse, which has a rather self-explanatory title. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's probably a bad idea to be thinking about that right now. As it's impossible not to see, there are a bunch of QR codes kind of spattered around everywhere. Those are for a reader's copy of this story, which I would highly recommend scanning and going in and, following along through that. Because there are a few visual elements in this story that that don't necessarily transfer to an audible reading. You're probably wondering, why would you read a story like that? I didn't think about it either. But anyways, the only way to start is to start. So, hold on, I'm going to put this off a little longer. Also, hi, Mom and Dad. Oh, I thought there was a message on there. I was like, uh-oh. He's alive, the lifeguard proclaimed, hurling her fist into the air, kneeling next to the elderly almost corpse. And it's all thanks to you, sir. The lifeguard gestured ceremoniously towards the sandy-haired man on her right. The hero who risked his life to lift this victim from the watery maws of Davy Jones's locker. What do you have to say for yourself? The man glanced at each of the faces in the crowd encircling him. The crowd, to him and everyone else, seemed a whole lot more like an adoring crowd. As such, cascaded dramatically against the almost setting sun, the man morphed into the hero, raised his fist into the air and screamed, "Yeah, I did save him, didn't I?" The almost corpse, shriveled and wrinkled, lying stomach up on the sand, seemed to mumble something, but no one noticed over the sound of the adoring crowd screaming incoherently in celebration. They converged their ring around the scene, grabbing the hero and the almost corpse, throwing them up and down in a nauseating rhythm. Everyone on the beach was in a good mood at this point, save 2 individuals. The almost corpse, who was just resuscitated, incredibly confused as to what just happened, and entirely within his right as an almost corpse to not exactly be in a jovial mood. And the failure, who also had some water in his lungs. The failure stood a distance away from the celebration, present at the scene, but not present, his sea green eyes staring at nothing but his memories of the past few minutes. or rather, trying to find the memories of how he ended up on the beach after witnessing the almost corpse drowning. Unable to recollect the answer, the failure blinked, his vision catching the undulating up and down of the hero. The hero was laughing. The failure curled his hand into a fist and marched toward the adoring crowd. Yeah, he began. What he did really wasn't all that special, you know? The lifeguard on the end of the circle turned around, still participating in the ceremonial throwing. Sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear you over us celebrating. Look, I know that guy saved a man from drowning and all, but I think it was really a group effort, you know? If it wasn't for me, you know, staring at the guy who was drowning, not doing anything to help, completely terrified, the failure trailed off, realizing that only some of the discomfort he felt came from his failure to put on sunscreen that morning. Then that hero wouldn't have known where to find the drowning guy. So yeah, group effort. At some point during the failure's ramblings, the not adoring crowd's attention had fixated entirely upon him. He felt like he was drowning, and everyone was content watching him flounder. The lifeguard spoke up. Actually, I think your staring just made it harder for the hero to rescue the guy. Like, you were an obstacle. Okay, no, I wasn't an obstacle. I think that's a little insensitive. You were an obstacle, actually. The not adoring crowd parted to reveal the hero marching toward the failure. A worthless plank of wood, actually. If there were more people like you, failure, then there would have been a gate impeding my saving of this man. Everyone stared at him. Because if there were more planks of wood, they'd form like a medieval gate that would block me. A chorus of O's rang out from the confused crowd. The failure put his hands up. Hey, this hero can't even throw an insult properly. That probably means he can't even swim. The hero smashed his foot down. I can swim. I swam, and he thought for a second. And I carried the almost corpse on my back with ease. He put his hands on his hips as the adoring crowd cheered for him. The almost corpse sputtered up some water, his shambling arm directing a finger toward the hero. See, even he agrees, the hero said. You never could have acted like I did. He cackled as the adoring crowd began to once more throw him repeatedly into the air. The failure felt the water in his lungs shift. The feeling threw him back into his memories again. He saw the almost corpse drowning in the distance, fumbling his thin, pale, helpless limbs, waiting for someone to reach out for him. With every drowned breath, the failure was reminded of his inaction, too near death himself to act. Or, at least, he wished he had that excuse. Or, more preferentially, no one saw him, entirely seized up, knee-deep in the water. All he could bring himself to do was stare like a plank of wood embedded in the sand, as the hero, as everyone seemed to tell him, acted. Let's go! Let's go! Those are our heroes, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who were following along in the document, I like half-lied when I said there were visual elements. There's only one, and it's like the capitalizations of the names. I wanted to recreate a drowning situation, all right? Unfortunately, that's impossible because we're in a chapel right now. But I wanted to insert something that was like just uncomfortable enough that like only a certain subsect of people would like see that and go like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like I'm gonna draw attention to that. So like kind of thinking about that for a moment. So I'm gonna like interrupt this reading every so often. I apologize. You're all like a captive audience out here. I was like, oh, this is a cool idea. And so like I imagine like a lot of you like weren't even in the document to begin with, and it's like, what the heck was that? You know, what was up with that? And in regards to that, I imagine some of you might have like not even been paying attention to the open document to see that. And then I imagine most importantly, I think, is that some of you saw it and were like, I'm not going to do that. There's no way I'm going to do that. And now that is all very crucial. And I want you to think about like your role in all of that. All right. Because we'll come back to it. All right. We'll come back to it. This is a lecture, man. Yeah. So anyways, back to the story. The failure planted his foot in the ground, casting sand everywhere. I challenged the hero to a contest. The hero seemed to suspend himself in the air, rigid in the arms of the adoring crowd. The failure locked eyes with him. We recreate the whole scenario. Almost corpse, people nearby, the whole thing. And then we see what happens this time. The failure knew this was a terrible idea. The concept of a contest was fundamentally flawed. Anyone could see that. Knowing one has to save someone versus it being a complete surprise were two radically different circumstances. But despite that, the failure wanted to act. What's your answer? The failure kept his foot planted in the sand. The hero stammered. I refuse to accept. Show that faker what's up, hero, the lifeguard shouted. Don't let him tarnish your title, another screamed. Break him in half, a child shrieked. The rest of the adoring crowd sprang to life with additional encouragement, egging on the hero to destroy the failure, who was quickly morphing into a villain. But the failure's lungs constantly reminded him of who he was, so he easily shrugged off that claim. With each compliment, the hero seemed to inflate more and more until finally he exploded. Fine, I shall accept the duel. He pointed toward a particularly burly man with iron balloons for arms. You, throw the guy back out into the water. The burly man turned to face the hero. He began. I'm actually not all that strong. The hero lowered his finger. I'm sorry? Don't worry, hero. Everyone thinks that at some point. The lifeguard's pretty strong, so I'm sure she could do it. With that, the newly classified, actually not burly man made way for the also newly classified burly lifeguard. She saluted. Anything for our hero. She meandered toward the consistently sputtering almost corpse, picked him up by the leg, spun him around like a helicopter, and hurled him back out into the water. He skipped across the ocean a few times before landing in the distance like a large audible splash. Phenomenal. Everyone, the hero turned toward the adoring crowd. I ask that you all leave us be. There can be no outside factors. The adoring crowd dispersed and became the regular bystanders. Wonderful, the hero began. Now we can begin. He looked around. No adoring faces were looking at him. He gulped. The failure sighed. Fine, let's just do this, and I can't swim. The failure blinked. He then took a deep breath and turned toward the hero, who apparently couldn't swim, who had apparently swum out into the water to save an almost corpse by apparently swimming. The hero flailed his arms in panic. I got caught up in the moment. You got a whole adoring crowd surrounding you, saying you're a hotshot hero who's a master swimmer, and it's hard not to say you did it. Then who saved him first? The hero shrugged. I don't know. I guess he just washed up on the shore or something. You. The failure turned and stomped toward the hero. Absolute. And tried to grab the hero's collar, which didn't exist. Chicken. Oh, and you're not Mr. I'm just going to stand around slack-jawed as a man drowns in the distance. The hero jammed a finger into the failure's face. If you got validated for being a hero, you think you wouldn't do the same as me? The failure recoiled. I wouldn't. And I would have done something if I had more time. The water in his lungs sloshed. The hero redirected his finger to himself. At least I'm honest in knowing I'm not better than this. I accept my title. He sat down in the sand. Then what do we do? I already know neither of us are going to act, so I guess we either wait for someone who's actually a hero or for the almost corpse to drown. The failure refused to look at the hero next to him, casting his gaze back out into the ocean. He was a plank again. The waves lapped against his feet, in and out, trying to pull him into the water, yet he stayed there, permanently embedded. He didn't want to drown any more than he already was. The crashing of the waves seemed to fade for a moment, replaced by the familiar yet barely perceptible vision of thin, pale, helpless limbs trying in vain to grab anything. The failure craned his neck to look around at the regular bystanders on the beach. They all played frisbee, sunbathed, and built sandcastles. Some were even in the water with the almost corpse, dunking each other, expecting their hero to do the job. The hero whose title should have belonged to anyone else. The failure felt the water in his lungs slosh as he got up. The water inside him sloshed around more as he walked toward the water. It sloshed further as he picked up speed, bounding toward the beckoning ocean, his feet slapping wet sand. The hero shot straight to his feet. You're no hero, failure! The hero was right, but he still ran. He had no idea if he was doing this for attention or because it was right. His running became more sluggish as he waded deeper into the water. His wading gave way to feverish swimming. Water soared as the failure, with the grace of someone masquerading as a professional Olympic swimmer while being fully cognizant of the fact that they aren't, smacked the surface of the water with wild hands and legs. The failure carved through the ocean in front of him, unable to stop himself. With every stroke of his arms, he turned his head, catching a refracted glimpse at the hero on the shore. In some visages of the water, the hero's eyes would wave with envy, at others with yearning. Or maybe he was just seeing himself in the water. Pressing on, the failure soon saw the unmistakable, very almost corpse flailing just beyond the crest of the wave in front of him. To make it seem like he wasn't a failure, he screamed out a passionate cry, only to suddenly taste a surprising amount of salt. In the shock of the moment, he realized that he no longer knew which way was up, entirely submerged within the depths of the ocean. He thrashed, aware he was turning, but unable to tell where. His brain refused to hold his breath. New water flooded into his lungs, compacting upon the old. He felt his insides boil as his body became driftwood, peacefully pulled along beneath the waves. The failure knew he wasn't a hero. He was a failure the moment he ran into the water. The moment he stared at the drowning almost corpse. The moment he woke up. The moment he was born. The whole thing was a terrible idea. The last thing he thought before completely blacking out was that he should have been more honest with himself about who he was. I'm sorry, that was a very ironic water break. But now we're gonna take a little break here again, because I want to jump back into that little experiment real quick. So we get to do a little audience participation. Ooh, yeah. That was a lot more cheers than I thought I was gonna get for that. So if for whoever's like comfortable like doing this, was it who saw the message in the document? All right. Now, this is not a call out, I swear. To those of you who did not act, is anyone comfortable with sharing why they didn't want to stand up and boo someone? Yeah, you in the back.
That would be disrespectful to you, to be honest.
Fair enough. Anyone else want to share their reason? Yeah, sure. That's fair. That's fair. I know that was a fast reaction on the part of them. Yep. There we go. Yeah, right. I would have been able to segue that, but yeah. Because I was going to say, like, if no one's comfortable, I can 100% answer this. And my answer was, like, that's terrifying, man. Like, you know, to get up in the middle of a reading and just boo someone. Like, no, and for the people who weren't in the document, that's just like, what is happening here, man? And so, like, that requires you as a person to have, like, an insane amount of extroversion that, like, I don't possess. I don't know. I'm fumbling up here, man. But, like, you know, and I'd 100% make a fool of myself if I did that. Like, you know, try to play it off all cool and stuff. And it's like, I'm just not built for that, you know? But anyways, that has a point, all right? And we will jump back into the story now. The failure wasn't quite sure where he was, but as he slowly brought his eyes open, it felt as if they had become light bulbs. He sputtered up some water, which dribbled onto his chest. He blinked a few times, allowing the orange of the sky to reconvene his vision, and turned his head to see the almost corpse, living up to his namesake once more. Water leaked from the failures' ears so he could hear again. He's alive, the burly lifeguard proclaimed, hurling her fist into the air. They're both alive, she threw up the other. They're both alive, even if one of them doesn't deserve to be. The failure wished he would die, but he also didn't want that to be the last thing he heard, so he held on a little longer. The burly lifeguard continued. And it's all thanks to you once again, hero. She gestured once more toward the sandy-haired hero. Without you, no one would have rescued these two. Yeah, the actually not burly man from before began. It's not like the complete failure dying on the ground over there was going to do anything. A worrying amount of laughter emanated from the adoring crowd. The failure hoped they weren't referring to him. It was purely coincidental that I happened to save these two again, the hero stuttered. The adoring crowd praised him for his humbleness. Nonetheless, someone had to act. He cast his gaze towards the failure. And show you all that only one person here deserves the title of hero. Upon finishing his assertion, the hero raised an empty fist in celebration. Only the failure could notice this, as the adoring crowd responded in kind with great gusto. Well, the burly lifeguard said, great job today, everyone. But I guess that's it for now. She stuck up her finger. But that doesn't mean the celebration is over. Everyone follow me to the cabana so we can celebrate our hero's success even more. The crowd cheered, picked up the hero, and carried him off, completely neglecting the failure and the almost corpse. For a single moment, the failure locked his vision into the hero's same sea green eyes. And then he was gone, carried off in a chorus of weighted cheers. See, that one was a lot easier, wasn't it? Like, you know, it's a lot more like socially acceptable to start cheering for someone rather than boo them. And like, what was that? Was that easier to do? Yeah, all right. And so, like, I don't know. I won't spend much time here, but you know, just think about why that might be. You know. Ooh. Anyways, back into the story. The failure still felt submerged in the water. Man, he tried to spit up the salty taste from his mouth and turned towards the almost corpse. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. He rubbed his eyes, but just put sand in them. I shouldn't have. The almost corpse released a guttural noise akin to a tidal wave. He rolled forward onto all fours as an ocean's worth of water flushed out of his mouth, eroding a ravine in the sand in front of him. Sputtering up the rest, he rolled onto his backside and said, "That hero is a fake!" The failure didn't even turn his head. Yeah, I know. Oh, the almost corpse cleaned the sand from the wrinkles on his back. I guess I was trying to say that the whole time. It's hard to act when you have so much water in your lungs. Maybe you should have coughed up all that water when that adoring crowd was here. The failure looked up at the changing sky, which slowly morphed into a deep purple. Hey, I tried to say something, so I think I should get some commendation. That doesn't mean anything. Maybe, or at least that's what that adoring crowd and hero would think. The almost corpse took a deep, undrowned breath. Guess that nullifies your wooden plankness. The failure blinked. What? Yeah, when I was drowning that second time, I saw you close by. After I ignored the water in my lungs and thrashed over to you, you were buoyant enough to keep me afloat. You used me as a buoy? The almost corpse shrugged. You're all seized up like a plank. Don't blame the dying man for grabbing on. The failure processed this information for a moment. Oh, that's just fantastic, he began. I did what a plank of wood could. Just call me Plank of Wood, the true hero of the day. He raised and dropped his arms, which hit the sand with a wooden thunk. Yep, I guess you could. The two sat there for a moment, listening to the envious cheers for the hero in the distance. Then the almost corpse rose from the sand. Well, there's no time like the present. Time to swim again. You... Huh? The failure sat up to see the almost corpse shambling towards the ocean. The failure stared for but a moment, casting his thoughts every worthless course of action he could take. But he launched upwards anyways and planted himself with a firmness rivaling the gates of the greatest medieval castle in front of the almost corpse. Are you that dense? Was all the failure could get out. Yeah, but you aren't. You float gracefully in the water like a plank and make a pretty sturdy gait, while I flail around like an almost corpse. The failures attempted a response was stopped by the water sloshing in his lungs. He doubled over, coughing, but no water emerged. Sorry, I just say it as I see it. Do with that what you will. The almost corpse performed a squat. Well, Plank of Wood, I'm tired of drowning and being an almost corpse, so I'm going to be less dense like you. Now look out, I'm feeling like a real swimmer this time around, the undensed perfect swimmer said, launching himself impossibly high into the air. The failure tried to stop him, but the seemingly undensed perfect swimmer, holding in his weight, soared straight over the failure, who was too distracted by his lungs to remember his role as a gate. The undensed perfect swimmer hit the water and floated, still rather like a corpse, but the failure didn't even notice. He then began to swim toward the deep. The confident visage propelled forward, his form accepting the turbulent water outside and in, cascading toward the horizon. From the shore, the failure stared unmoving at the sight until it vanished. The purple sky morphed into a deep purple, but it was still the sky. The water began to cool, but the failure failed to notice. Reflecting failure and hero off the water, he also failed to notice something as he waded in deeper, his body wanting to acclimate to the new temperature. When he reached a suitable distance, he laid on his back. The waves lapped him up and carried him a short distance from the shore. The plank of wood drifted listlessly on his back in the ocean, the water in his lungs a little more still than usual. Thank you.